everybody, this is Brian.
And I'm Logan, and this is Tops.
Sup?
And this is Bottoms.
Sup?
And this is Triple. Sup? Avocados. Are these even real?
Oh, I don't know, but it's story time. Let's find out. Wow.
And we're Crush Cards. Hi, team. Happy Monday, my magical monsters. Boy, oh boy, have I got a special installment for you. For those of you who may be new to the channel or just, haven't been around for a while, welcome to Lore with Logan. I have a playlist of this up on the channel where basically every now and then I will do lore for certain archetypes, certain cards, and here we are today. And guess what? If you can't tell, we're going to be covering the dangers. Now, there wasn't a super cohesive storyline with all of the danger cards in the danger archetype, so I really want to focus this lore in a bit of a different way than the past lores where I kind of do it as a whole story. This one is going to be focusing on the individual cards and the individual abilities of the dangers that made them so popular as cryptids in their designated regions. We're kind of going on a little vacation since we can't. We're gonna kind of bounce around the world together and see what these are all about. But before we do that, it would be really super cool if you guys would subscribe to the channel because it helps me do more of these things and we're a good time. Like the video and comment what your favorite cryptid is, or comment a cryptid that I didn't mention or that isn't a danger card that you'd like to see being made into a danger card. And then of course we also have an Instagram, we have a Discord, we have a Patreon, we've got a whole bunch of cool things. Links are in the description box down below if you want to go check them out. But we're just going to get right into this lovely story and start traveling the world together. So buckle up, sit back, get your plane tickets, and let's see where the alpacas are going to take us today. So here we have our big beautiful map of the world that we're going to be traveling today, and each alpaca has assigned themselves a different cryptid that they wanted to research. So we're going to start things off in West Virginia, where our sweet special first boy Tops seems to have found himself in the gift shop getting really excited about West Virginia and John Denver. Two things I never thought I would say. I hope all the other alpacas are having as much fun as Tops is in West Virginia, because boy oh boy, take me home country roads, we've got a really interesting cryptid to talk to you about, team.
So we actually find ourselves in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, specifically in the West Virginia Ordnance Works Munitions Plant area. This is also known as the TNT area. In this specific area is known for Mothman. Now, the TNT area is known for producing a ton of World War II munition supplies, and it's known as the TNT area because it takes up 8,323 acres of land. Now, the story takes place in the 1960s with the first sighting of the Mothman. Now, Mothman was described as a humanoid-like figure with a gigantic wingspan and big red glowing eyes. As the lore progressed, the details got more and more elaborate. Certain cases even described that the Mothman could fly up to 90 miles per hour as it was chasing them in their cars.
Why were you driving 90 miles an hour in West Virginia is my thing.
They were trying to get away from this flying man with big glowing red eyes.
I gotta make it to Ohio, he can't get me there.
The Mothman actually got its name from a few newspaper articles when the reports were being described. It didn't have a name, but Mothman's name was actually given to him because it looked like a moth man, and back in the 60s, Batman was a huge piece of pop culture. The author of the report was a huge Batman fan, therefore Mothman to him just seemed fitting. Several stories also described Mothman as Birdman, so for any of you who may have heard of Birdman, Birdman and Mothman are actually the same exact cryptid. Now, some seem to think that because of the munitions plant and all of the chemicals and all of the supplies that were used there, that it was actually a mishap and it was somebody who got into these chemicals and started having mutations.
Some Joker style stuff. Oh, back in the Batman theme, I see.
The Mothman terrorized the town of Point Pleasant for almost 10 years. One of the last reports was in 1967 when a catastrophic event happened, and that was the collapse of the Silver Bridge. Some say that there were eyewitness reports of the Mothman being on the bridge as it collapsed, leading to its disappearance. Others think that the Mothman was actually a gift from God, there to show that the bridge was going to collapse, warning people. And other people tried to take a more logical route, saying that the reason that Mothman died out was because the huge news of the bridge collapsing overrode the hype of the Mothman. Since the disappearance of the Mothman, people have tried to speculate what it could reasonably have been, all of which vary from owls, who are known for having glowing eyes and very big wingspans, or some think that it could be the Sands Hill crane, which have the same exact wingspan and red patches around their eyes, both of which are known to be currently in the Point Pleasant area, that it was an actual cryptid terrorizing the town. Regardless of the tale, West Virginia has a 7-foot statue of Mothman in the middle of their town, and they hold festivals while also embracing the Mothman culture.
So he's basically just become like a cult classic in West Virginia, which is both hilarious and kind of weird. Like, guys, do you just not have anything else to get excited about, I guess?
Due to the Mothman, it's really funny because reports say that West Virginia actually makes about 70% of their income just based off of the Mothman lore alone.
That's hysterical.
Thanks so much, Tops, for giving us all this information. Your research was perfect, bud.
All right, so we can check Mothman off of our little cryptid to-do list. Let's see where we're going next. Good news is we're not going too far. We're just bopping on over to Michigan, where it appears that Brock went to a lovely Red Wings hockey game, and as Tops got carried away in the gift shop. He's sporting some really wonderful looks here. And I know you certainly can't tell by what he's wearing, but Brock actually wanted to research about Danger Dogman. The Dogman is a popularized cryptid in Michigan folklore, which kind of is a culmination of native folklore along with just pop culture and hoaxery coming together. And the Dogman has actually been around as a cryptid since about the 1880s, which is crazy. It's one of the older ones that we're going to be talking about. The Dogman himself is described as like a 7-foot tall, blue or amber-eyed, which are two totally different colors, so I don't know how that became a thing, literal human person with a dog head. He also howls like a wolf because he's a dog. But according to legend, he only appears in 10-year cycles that end on the number 7, which is actually a really cool little fun fact because Dogman himself, as a Yu-Gi-Oh card, is a level 7. Spooky, am I right? It's also pretty cool because his discard effect, when he's discarded, he makes all monsters your opponent control lose 1,000 attack, which is an increment of 10. So that's pretty neat how they played into the 10 and 7 role with Dogman. And you'll see some of the dangers actually do play into their effects with their folklore. It's pretty neat. So the first actual alleged encounter with the Michigan Dogman occurred in 1887 in Wexford County, where 2 lumberjacks apparently saw a creature that was described as having a human body and a dog's head. I don't know what happened to them because they didn't say anything.
Can you imagine seeing that at work one day? You just look up from your logging and there's just like a dog man looking at you. I'm good.
And then in the early 1930s, another man was apparently attacked by 5 wild dogs, and then he said that one of them was walking on 2 legs. I don't, like, could you imagine? First of all, how are you getting attacked by 5 wild dogs, and then you just happen to notice that one is walking on 2 legs? It's like, okay. There are different Dogman myths all around the US. There's one in Minnesota, there's one in the Pacific Northwest, but in Michigan there was actually a DJ who recorded a song, I think called The Dogman, and it got really popular, and so that's how the Dogman just kind of got his real claim to fame in the Michigan pop culture area. There's not a whole lot known about the Dogman, other than he's just a big dog man, and there's been alleged sightings here and there, but you know, no bodies, no actual evidence, just big dogs, wolves, and people messing around in the woods. He's not one of the most popular cryptids, but it is really cool that he was made into a danger. It's also worth noting that in the Danger Dogman card, he has the amber eyes instead of the blue eyes, which once again is obviously just up to creative interpretation of the lore. He's also got some pretty sick ear piercings, so I guess he's an edgy dogman. But thanks so much, Brock, for letting us know about Dogman, and I hope you enjoyed your hockey game, bud. So you'll notice that a lot of these cryptids are taking us around the United States. There are some that are not in the US that we will be getting to, don't you worry. But a lot of these, as you know, American culture at its finest, coming up with many fun, fantastical things, some of which may be true. I don't know, you let me know. But next stop, we're going to Wyoming, another really exciting state where it looks like Sir Pops has also found a t-shirt of Yellowstone Park. And yes, Wyoming is literally a rectangle, which is why we put a nice ruler in the corner. Thank you, Sir Pops, for letting us know our geometry for the day. While it might not seem like Wyoming has too much going on at a first glance, I'm sure Sir Pops has found a wonderful cryptid for us to talk about, and that is Danger Jackalope, everyone's favorite little conniving bunny rabbit.
Jackalope's one of the more popular dangers because it actually allows you to go plus.
He's also only at 1 now. Feels bad. It's kind of interesting that Konami keeps putting the dangers to 1 because it's like kind of fitting to the whole lore aspect, because you know there's only one of the cryptid that exists, or is there? I don't know. But believe it or not, Jackalope has actually been around for centuries. He didn't just originate in Wyoming. Jackalope has actually been around in artworks and depictions for thousands of years, especially in Persian and medieval Renaissance folklore, where they depict rabbits with little unicorn horns or just one single horn. So So it's really interesting because they would give really specific descriptions of these animals like jackalopes, and people didn't really say like, oh, those aren't real, or oh, these are totally real. It was just like, here's jackalope, that's it. And for a long time, people didn't really question it. But by the 18th century, scientists were kind of like, yeah, these probably aren't real. They were probably just really fantastical depictions that went with the art pieces. But it is a little weird that all of these art pieces came around at different time periods and totally different continents altogether, all depicting this same little bunny with a unicorn horn. Now, as we know, the popular jackalope today, he has antlers. He doesn't just have like a little unicorn horn. His depiction has changed over the years. And in the 1930s, the whole antler archetype thing with the jackalope was popularized by some brothers who were taxidermists, and literally they just were hunting bunnies, hunting deer, and they just mashed them together, and they're like, this looks pretty cool, I'm gonna put this on my wall. And people were like, yo, that's actually really rad. And that's how the whole Wyoming jackalope lore became a thing. It's literally just like a part of the culture there. But the jackalope itself has become a really popular cryptid both in like South Dakota, Wyoming, that general region of the US, and of course it's obviously a widespread worldwide cryptid. But again, where did everyone kind of get this idea of a bunny with these antlers or horns? That's a really specific image that people have been making for hundreds of years. And scientists believe that they're actually bunny rabbits or hares that have become infected with the Shope papillomavirus, which causes horn-like tumors on the bodies of these poor bunny rabbits. It's really not cute, it's really sad. But that seems to be a sort of striking resemblance to a jackalope in a natural sort of way, be it kind of horrifying. And if you actually look at the jackalope card, he doesn't just have the antlers on his head. He has two little horns on the front in front of his antlers, and then he kind of has some horns along his shoulder blades. And I do think that those little horns are kind of a nod to the papillomavirus that these rabbits were known to have. So it's kind of cool because, you know, Konami obviously made it much cuter on the card, but it plays into both aspects of the lore of the natural consequence of how these happened and the, you know, artificial one with the two brothers who kind of just smashed two animals together to make it happen. Also, fun fact, jackalopes are commonly described as their tagline of fearsome critter. They're basically ankle biters, and they're known to mimic human voices, and they apparently sing in a tenor range.
That's really high for anyone who doesn't know.
Brian's a tenor.
Counter tenor.
And that's another cool thing about the cryptids. A lot of them do mimic human voices, so you'll see that as a reoccurring trend throughout the lore. I hope you're taking notes. But yeah, that's jackalope. He's been around, he's been hopping around all over the world apparently for centuries. And that actually could play into his discard effect, where if he is discarded, you can special summon another danger in defense position from your deck, implying that he's hopping around the world because he's so popular, and therefore you're revealing all of these other cryptids as well, which is pretty neat. But again, just my interpretation. So thanks so much, Pops, for taking us to good old Wyoming. I hope you like your shirt. It looks very cozy. And thank you for letting us talk about jackalope. Let's see where we're going next, team. But before we get into our next official danger cryptid, we're going to take a little detour way off to the eastern hemisphere, where we're going to check out the Indian Ocean and talk about Almirage. Now, I didn't send any of the alpacas here because Almirage actually originated on Sea Serpent Island, which is actually a very dangerous place where they are known to actually eat small, adorable alpacas that are stuffed. So I didn't want any of the alpacas to go there by themselves or as a team because I value their lives. So I'm just going to talk about it with you really quick. Now, as you know, Almirage actually has two cards in the Yu-Gi-Oh game. He has like an effect monster, and then there's of course the more popular Salamangreat Almirage, which is the Link one that is used in several decks and literally serves no purpose to Salamangreat itself. Now, Almirage has been around for thousands of years, like before the Common Era, and again lived on Sea Serpent Island off the coast of the Indian Ocean. The island itself was an extremely dangerous place where people lived and was constantly plagued by dragons and torment, but the Almirage itself was a gift to Alexander the Great after he defeated a dragon that was eating all of the livestock on the island, and all of the people who lived there, to thank him, gave him an actual Almirage. I don't really know why Almirages were the object of gift giving and why those were the thing, but it's been written in several stories and accounts and paintings and everything too, so that's kind of cool. But the Almirage, like the jackalope, has been depicted as a small hare or bunny rabbit with a unicorn horn. So if we kind of go back to those Persian and medieval paintings, it could have also been an Almirage and not necessarily a jackalope, because it appears that the Almirage has just been around longer. So that's pretty cool. We're mixing our Greek history and our other history, and we're getting bunnies everywhere, team. But now that that's over, we can actually go back onto our scheduled route. Getting back on track, we're heading back to North America, where we're actually going to spend some time in the Pacific Northwest for all of you hipsters out there. And it seems that Henry has actually become a hipster himself. Wow, Henry, way to just play into your name, Henry the hipster. He's converted to the Starbucks way of life, and I'm sure it's a PSL in his hand. He takes after me. And Henry told me that we're actually going to be talking about Bigfoot. Now, Bigfoot is probably the most popular hoax, cryptid, mythological creature in the US or maybe even the world. I don't know. But as far as I know, Bigfoot is definitely the big one. No pun intended. So Bigfoot himself has actually been around for a long time, even though he didn't actually get super popular until the 1970s. He's had a ton of different names. He's been the Wild Man, he's been the Hairy Man, he's been the Sasquatch, and all of these have been derived from loggers, just regular people coming up with names for him, and Native American folklore. And actually, about a third of the Bigfoot sightings are located in the Pacific Northwest, which is why we're over here, and the rest of them are spread throughout the US. But most of them have generally been identified as hoaxes because, you know, it's Bigfoot. He's big, you could throw on a costume, and it's not hard to look like a dude with hair.
Yeah, he's the most humanoid looking one.
And Bigfoot has actually been regarded as the first widely popularized example of pseudoscience in American culture. He's become so fake that people think he's real, or he's so real that people think he's fake. He's just a really elusive piece of American culture at this point. But in case you don't know what Bigfoot actually looks like, he's generally described between 6 and 9 feet tall. He looks like a big, hair-covered dude. He's known as benign-faced because he doesn't really have facial expressions of really any particular type. Obviously, they live in the woods.
Other folklore has also said that if you see a Bigfoot, you don't live to tell the tale because their eyes are so mesmerizing that by the time you realize what has happened, you've already been attacked, and that's basically it.
Also, I believe it was in the Native American part of the lore that children were told not to say the name of Bigfoot or Sasquatch or its actual native name because that means it was going to target you and come after you. So it was basically like a scary bedtime story for kids. Bigfoot is described by scientists as a Homo sapien type of creature who basically just looks like what a human would have looked like thousands and millions of years ago. So is it likely that he's real? Probably not.
Bigfoot was always one of those like cryptids that really enamored me. I thought that like as a kid growing up, you always heard about Bigfoot no matter where you were. I always thought Bigfoot was cool. There's so many documentaries on Bigfoot. There's so many magazine articles. There's so many just different ways for you to hear about this story that I think Bigfoot was probably just my favorite growing up. I always wanted to go into the woods one day and just find one.
And there are different versions of the Bigfoot story, of course, and their actions and how they behave. For example, some believe that the Bigfoot are an entire race of cannibals who live in the mountains of Mount St. Helens in southern Washington and basically just eat people. So some of them are more gruesome, some of them are more goofy, and there's been countless documentaries about Bigfoot. And I think it's kind of plausible that it could exist, but at the same time, there's been so many hoaxes everywhere that I don't even feel like it's just one anymore. People think there's like 1,000 of them. But yeah, in regards to the actual Danger Bigfoot card, he's big, that's it.
I think it's really interesting too that he's the most popular, therefore he has the most attack points, aka he has the most value or offers the most utility in any deck, because playing into his name, not only is he big and is he powerful, but if he is discarded, he still destroys something.
So even if you deny his existence, someone's still gonna believe in him and still gonna wreck your stuff. But it's also really funny that he has 0 defense because there's literally no like evidence defending his existence. Haha, get it? It's kind of funny. But thanks so much, Henry, for letting us know and for getting us coffee. That was really cool of you, dude. I appreciate it.
I'm glad you made it back safe and didn't encounter any big hairy mans.
And good news is we don't have to go anywhere for the next one, but we do have a whole different son who's going to talk to us about Thunderbird. And guess what, everybody? It's Bottoms! Bottoms is going to talk to us about Danger Thunderbird. Now, Thunderbird is popular in the Pacific Northwest, but he is not only in the Pacific Northwest. Thunderbird is in Canada and in other regions of North America because the Thunderbird is actually a very popular and powerful symbol in Native American culture. Good news is, Bottoms isn't wearing any memorabilia from any gift shops, which is always nice to see, but it appears that he found a totem pole. And look at my son being the little intellectual that he is. A lot of totem poles in Native culture place the Thunderbird at the top because, again, it is a symbol of power. The Thunderbird is known to watch over people, and it obviously resides in the skies, the heavens, you know, the whole shebang, so it's at the top. Thunderbird is actually really cool and one of my favorite dangers personally, both as a card and as a cryptid. And in Native culture, the Thunderbird is the controller of thunder and lightning, both as an element and in nature, and the Thunderbird has been known as the protector of the upper world. So there's the lower lower world, which is kind of ruled by this evil panther, I guess, who stirs chaos and causes problems on our ground level world. And the Thunderbird is known to live in the skies and basically strike down the panther and its chaos whenever it rises up here in the human world. The Thunderbird is able to create thunder with a flap of its wings and shoot lightning from his eyes. And what's really cool is its actual cryptid abilities play into its danger effect, much like the other cards do. Danger Thunderbird, when it's discarded, destroys a set spell or trap on the field. Now, as I just said, it protects the ground level world that we all live on whenever evil or chaos from this lower world panther comes up. So, Danger Thunderbird, being above, destroys whatever darkness or underworld kind of stuff is on the earth, which is the set spell or trap. And it's interesting that it's a set spell or trap because it's flipped upside down, meaning that it's like in the underworld. It's also in the spell and trap zone, which is lower than the monster zone. So it's really cool that Thunderbird actually, like, you know, zaps the set card and destroys it and protects itself and, you know, your field from your opponent. So that's pretty neat. I really like the design of Thunderbird. And then on a physical standpoint, Thunderbird has colorful feathers, very sharp teeth, and is known to be super vibrant, much like the card it is. I think the Yu-Gi-Oh card actually did a really good job depicting it. It has the lightning coming from its eyes. It's huge.
Which I think is really interesting because it actually plays into its stat line being the second biggest danger in its attack line.
It's also worth noting that in native culture, it's said that whenever you had a dream about a Thunderbird, it meant you were destined to be a chief, which is pretty neat. So basically, all in all, the Thunderbird is a protector, a source of power, and a big, beautiful bird who zaps stuff and makes your world a safer place.
Which, once again, playing into the danger effect, I think is really cool because a lot of these dangers are more like combo pieces, so to speak. So it protects you from back row, which is that like unknown set kind of ominous threat.
So yeah, Thunderbird is a source of power, but also a symbol to be feared. You shouldn't take the Thunderbird for granted, which is also really cool and plays into the whole, you know, danger Yu-Gi-Oh aspect. It's almost like there's a consequence for not believing in their existence. But thanks so much, Bottoms, for letting us know all that. Thanks for all your hard work. I'm glad you found that totem pole, buddy. I'm sure it was very hard to carry over here to show us. All right, so we can finally leave the Pacific Northwest, and now we're going to take a nice little jaunt over the border into Canada, into the British Columbia region.
This is where most people actually think we're from, ironically, which we're not. We're from New York.
But Canada's wonderful. We love you, Canada. Can't wait to come back and see y'all someday.
And your syrup.
And what do we have here? It's Middles! Middles is in Canada today. And how thoughtful of Middles to have gotten us a syrup souvenir. Thanks, Middles. And it seems to be a trend that the alpacas are really into hockey today. Maybe I need to put them in a league or something. Let me know in the comments. So Middles is going to be sharing some information about Ogopogo with us, and I can't wait to see all that we're about to unveil about our favorite slithery sea serpent. So Ogopogo is actually a massive pop culture piece in the Okanagan region, and he actually has the nickname Augie, which is really cute, and that's honestly just how people refer to Ogopogo. And his name is actually also a palindrome. In case you never really looked at the name Ogopogo, it is also Ogopogo backwards. So Okanagan Lake itself is the largest of 5 interconnected freshwater fjord lakes in the Okanagan Valley in British Columbia. And the name Okanagan is derived from the First Nations people who lived there. The lake itself has existed for over 10,000 years, and Ogopogo, as a cryptid, has also existed for quite some time, beyond the 1800s. So there's actually not a real origin story for the name Ogopogo itself. There was a song made about Ogopogo in 1924, I believe, but it doesn't really give any backstory to the actual name itself. It just seems to have apparently stuck with the people who live in the area, and that just seems to be the easy name that everyone settled with. But in terms of its native origins, the actual native name given by the First Nations is Naitaka, which translates to water demon, water god, or sacred being of the water. But with that being said, Ogopogo is not your local friendly sea serpent that you go hanging out and feeding bread. He's a very evil, conniving being that demanded live sacrifice if you wanted to get in or cross the Okanagan Lake safely. So he came with a price. So a lot of First Nations people would actually sacrifice small animals as tribute in order to go in the lake and cross it, because it is a very large lake and, well, people had to get from one side to the other. But there are tales of a chief who chose not to believe in Ogopogo and actually refused to give a live sacrifice. And when he entered in a canoe with his family, Naitaka whipped up the surface of the lake with his long tail, and the canoe and all within it were sucked to the bottom of the lake, never to be seen again. The Naitaka, or Ogopogo, was often also described to use its tail to create fierce whirlpools in order to drown its victims. People also consider Ogopogo to be a worm-type creature, you know, W-Y-R-M, which is actually a type in Yu-Gi-Oh! So I find it really weird that they didn't actually type Ogopogo as a worm, instead they chose a sea serpent. Then again, they might just not have been thinking about that. But the first non-native sighting of Ogopogo was actually in 1872, when a white settler who came to create relations with the natives in the area said she saw the Ogopogo. And since then, there have of course been tons of alleged sightings of Ogopogo, some complete hoaxes, some claims that there's a large sea creature like 30 feet long just hanging out in the water. And Ogopogo is said to reside by Rattlesnake Island, which is within the Okanagan Lake. But overall, Ogopogo has become kind of this cute symbol of the Okanagan region. They have cute statues of him everywhere. He's basically their version of the Loch Ness Monster, which I think is super wholesome. And other small sea creatures and critters in the area have also been nicknamed Ogopups. So they're little like pups of Ogopogo. It's just really cute. I think it's super adorable, even though he's like a big demonic fish.
What I think is really cool now that we've like gone over the Ogopogo lore is if you look at the card art for Ogopogo, in the bottom right hand corner you actually see the canoe, which is really cool. And his effect is also you get to send one danger card from your deck to your graveyard. So it's kind of like you're paying the cost to cross the river.
So you have to sacrifice something in order to get across. That's so cool. And it also kind of plays into like the drowning effect too, that like you're being sent to the graveyard. It's so cool. I don't know if they really thought about this, but Konami, if you did and you're watching, which you're not, big thumbs up to you. That's super cool. So feel free to make sure you check out your danger cards and take a good look at them, because there's some little Easter eggs in there and their effects are actually really relevant. But that's our sweet special Canadian boy Augie. Thanks so much, Middles, for letting us know all this fun stuff. And now we're gonna cross the sea to talk about another lovely sea creature that is significantly, if not the most popular cryptid that we have to talk about.
Next, we have our sweet little boy Triples trying to look for avocados over in Scotland. It doesn't appear that he did find any.
But he's got a sick bagpipe. I think he's trying to serenade the Loch Ness Monster into coming out and saying hi. Triples just wants to be friends, Nessie. I don't know.
So Nessie is one of the most popular cryptids out there. Obviously, its name, for anyone who hasn't heard it, is the Loch Ness Monster. And its name derived from the location in which it was first seen, which is a loch. Loch is just Irish or Gaelic for the word lake.
So it literally just means lake monster.
It's specifically located in the Highlands of Scotland. The Highlands of Scotland are also known for being extremely deep, extremely dark, murky, and very suspicious. The first sighting of Nessie was on July 22nd, 1933. The witness said that they saw a dragon-like figure poke its head up from out of the water. Since then, to current date, there has been over 5,000 sightings of Nessie. One of the most popular sightings was in 1934 when a photo emerged of Nessie actually peeking his head out of the water. It was later proven that this photo was actually a hoax and that it was a toy mounted on top of a submarine to feed into the actual lore of Nessie.
That's hilarious.
But what is interesting is that archaeologists who have studied the area have found many ancient stone carvings with different animals all over them from multiple different timelines. All of these animals have been identified except one. This one animal is supposedly a dragon-looking serpent with 4 fins, aka the Loch Ness Monster. In 1987 and in 2003, there were 2 attempts to actually try to find Nessie using sonar technology. In 1987, the attempts were unsuccessful because they said that the waters were too deep, too murky, and they found nothing. But in 2003, one of their attempts found a very large moving object very deep in the depths of the loch, but as soon as they locked onto its signal, it vanished out of thin air.
Nessie as a myth has also been around since about the 6th century, believe it or not. While it became more popularized in the 20th century, the first actual reported incident of Nessie was in the year 565, where an Irish monk actually observed that a man was swimming in the river when he was attacked by a giant water beast that dragged him underwater and basically demolished him.
Sounds fun.
Apparently, he sent one of his followers to go swim across the river and investigate, which I don't know why this guy did that. And the beast actually approached him, but the guy made the sign of the cross and then said, "Go no further, do not touch the man, go back at once." And then the creature stopped as if it had been pulled back with ropes and fled. So that is what people believed to be like the first incident with Nessie, and kind of cemented it into the culture that would eventually develop into the Loch Ness Monster as we know it today. And for those of you who don't know, Nessie is a very large sea creature, sometimes with humps on his back, a super long neck, modeled after a plesiosaur, and apparently he can live for hundreds of years, much like the lore has depicted him to be. I would almost think it's safe to say to argue that Nessie is more popular than Bigfoot. Comment section, feel free to let me know. Which one do you think is more popular, Bigfoot or Nessie? Nessie is also thought to have a sister creature in Lake Champlain here in New York. Obviously hasn't been proven, but people do think there is a Loch Ness Monster here in Lake Champlain. I don't think that one's totally relevant, but hey, I'm a firm believer in Nessie. We don't know what's in these waters. I firmly believe that there's some big boss monster hanging out down there.
Though Nessie is a cryptid and it's one of those pieces of ancient folklore, the search still continues to find proof for Nessie. In 2019, researchers released a statement saying that they tested several different DNA types that they have found in the water, and one was unknown to anything in mankind's history.
That's pretty scary. I feel like Nessie's a little more plausible than Bigfoot and a lot of the cryptids because we don't even know what's in the oceans, nonetheless these lakes. So to discredit a giant sea serpent, I feel like is almost foolish, especially when we don't have the means to be looking through these lakes literally from top to bottom.
Speaking of looking, that actually ties into Nessie's effect, because if Nessie is discarded, you get to search for another danger, which kind of goes along with the entire lore because people are still always searching for Nessie.
Ooh, so you may not be able to find Nessie, but you get to add a different cryptid to your hand, which I think is really neat. Oh, Nessie, always eluding us. How romantic. But thanks so much, Triples! Now we're gonna take a real big leap. So next up on our journey, we are taking a trip down south where we are entering Latin America to meet Stops, who has so excitedly grabbed some tacos for himself, which, are actually native to Mexico, believe it or not. I know, crazy, wild facts, they were not invented by Taco Bell. It appears that Stops is getting very festive with his adventures, and we're going to be talking about Chupacabra in this segment. And now I know the map is really focused on Mexico, but Chupacabra as a cryptid actually originated in Puerto Rico, so this is kind of an all-encompassing Latin American cryptid. It's not simply focused on Mexico, but these are the maps the alpacas gave us, so we're gonna work with it. But we're traveling all over Latin America here, team, so let's talk about Chupacabra. So as I just said, Chupacabra actually originated in Puerto Rico, and its name means goat sucker. Chupar means sucker, and then cabra means goat. Literally that's it. So the goat part of the name Chupacabra actually came to rise in around March 1995 in Puerto Rico when a radio host was talking about an incident where 8 goats were found dead with puncture wounds in their chest. Their wounds were 3 puncture wounds in like a triangle shape, and the animals apparently had been drained of all of their blood, almost like a vampire. But then more incidents were recorded that were not simply just goats, but other types of livestock as well.
Which is why if you look at the Chupacabra image for Danger Chupacabra, its fangs are highlighted as it has vampire-like features.
And apparently a really long tongue. The Chupacabra itself is said to be about 3 to 4 feet in length or height, and it apparently hops like a kangaroo, even though it is a bipedal-like creature. People have compared it to a canine or a dog, saying that it basically looks like a big hairless puppy, but far more menacing and far more ugly, with spikes sticking out of its back, blood-red eyes, and a scaly-like feature almost. So it's kind of got this hybrid between a reptile and a dog, but it hops like a kangaroo. I'm not really sure why, but that's absolutely terrifying if you think of a mental image. But yeah, the Chupacabra ended up developing a vampire reputation because it was allegedly draining the blood from its victims and was only targeting animals, which was quite bizarre, which also plays into the effect of the discard effect of the danger card, because when Danger Chupacabra is discarded, its effect is to resurrect a danger from the graveyard. So that's really cool because vampires obviously resurrect from grave, they're the undead, so it's actually really cool that they did that. So again, big props to Konami for playing into that whole vampire aspect of Chupacabra.
There are many theories surrounding the actual Chupacabra and what it is or what it could have been or could be, but in 1996, Puerto Rico actually housed U.S. military in Fort Buchanan, and a lot of people actually thought that it could have been an experiment that escaped. We've seen pictures of things that float up on the beach all the time that potentially could look like a chupacabra or some sort of a mutant type animal, so I guess that's not such a far-fetched idea. But what I think is really, really interesting about the chupacabra itself is that all of the other cryptids are more folklore, whereas this one actually became political, because by 1996, over 2,000 animals fell victim to El Chupacabra.
Spooky.
Which leads Mayor Kimo Soto, who organized a rally of over 200 people in campaign for his next election, to gather together as many people as they possibly could. Some of them were even armed police officers, and they went around the town for a few days dragging around a goat in a cage, as they thought goats were the Chupacabra's favorite victims, just in an attempt to try to catch this thing and settle down some of the rumors. Now, there was no noted reports of any success for that, but props to Mayor Soto for dragging around the goat in the cage for a couple days.
Man, politics are wild, aren't they? It's also said that a lot of the hype around the Chupacabra incidents in the early 1995-1996 time period was because of the release of the 1995 movie Species, which was shot in Puerto Rico, and literally the description of the chupacabra that people were coming up with was also eerily similar to the main monster of the Species movie. So a lot of people speculated that they were just kind of influenced by this movie and kind of riding the hype train. Also, scientists were discrediting the existence of the chupacabra for sucking the blood dry of victims, because when an animal dies, the blood actually seeps to their lowest part of the body, so it might seem like they're drained of blood, but really the blood has just settled down to the lowest parts of the body when they die. Again, lots of skeptics, lots of believers, and of course the chupacabra itself is one of the most famous cryptids in Latin American lore. It's in South America, Mexico, the Caribbean, Puerto Rico still. I remember watching, I think, a Scooby-Doo movie that had a chupacabra in it when I was younger. I don't know, but the chupacabra is wildly popular.
I remember hearing about these stories when I was at like summer camps and stuff like that, and how it was going to come and get us in the middle of the night. Now, as we said, there are many skeptics for stories like these, but some of the actual explanations that have been scientifically provided was that there was a huge spike in the mongoose population around 1996 in Puerto Rico. There was also a huge migration of wild dogs into the population as well, and some people even seem to think that the bite marks could have resembled bats, who are nocturnal, which is exactly when all the attacks were taking place.
But that's chupacabra, so thanks so much, Stops. I hope you saved us some tacos, buddy. And make sure you get home safe. Don't let no scary puppies come at you. You're small, soft, and adorable. And then on to our last sweet special boy for our lore. Yes, we are going overseas, over the Pacific, and we're bopping on over to Japan for a very special cryptid with a very special alpaca boy. We're visiting Pips, and Pips is very happy. He made it just in time for cherry blossom season, apparently. He traveled back in time, or he's in the future. I'm not really sure anymore. 2020 is wild. But Pips has been researching one of our honorary sons. He's one of my favorite cards in the game, and if you guys have been an OG watcher of the channel, you know that I absolutely love our sweet special boy, Tsuchinoko. And we had to save the best for last, you know? So Tsuchinoko is a really fun one that I've been very excited to talk about. The cryptid Tsuchinoko has been around for over 1,200 years in terms of lore. It was written in one of the oldest sort of mythology books that Japan has. I think it's the Kojiki. And the lore originated in the Kansai and Shikoku regions of western Japan. So Tsuchinoko himself actually originated in the Kansai and Shikoku western regions of Japan, but he's also very well known in the eastern part of Japan, where his name is a little different, and it's actually Bachihebi.
That's a cute name.
I think it literally means like dirt child or like hammer child. It's like some goofy name that does not flatter him in any way, shape, or form. But according to the lore, Tsuchinoko has been around since the Nara period in Japan, where he was first sighted, and he quite literally is just like his danger card. He's a small little snake who's about 80 centimeters at best, with a very small head, a very small tail, and a real big girthy midsection.
He's chunky.
He's a chunky boy. What I did not know about Tsuchinoko is that they're actually very fond of deceit and lying, and are little tricksters at heart. But you could find a Tsuchinoko typically in watery caves and the mountain region, which, as some of you might know, is actually a lot of Japan. Japan is actually only inhabited with people in about 10% of it, and the rest of the 90% is, well, nature, where, you know, spooky, scary things like Tsuchinokos are waiting there to bite your ankles.
A lot of people seem to think also that this is one of the main reasons that you don't hear a lot about the Tsuchinoko, even though it has been first documented since the year 712. Because there's a ton of unexplored regions in Japan, it's hard to see something if you're not in the actual area in which it inhabits.
Some sources also say that the Tsuchinoko was not just a snake, but was actually a creature with 4 very small, itty bitty legs that didn't really do much for it, so it slithered anyway, but I just really struggled to imagine 4 tiny feet on Tsuchinoko.
Part of the lore also says that this snake doesn't actually move by going side to side, it does move by going up and down. So instead of your normal slither pattern that most snakes have, it actually moves in a straight line. So try to imagine this chubby looking grinning snake moving straight at you instead of slithering at you.
Just like a worm, a big cute worm. It's also said that Tsuchinokos do have tiny little horns in some descriptions, and they're typically a brownish color, and then they have allegedly a very orange underbelly. So he's pink in the card, which I'm not complaining about, but you can definitely tell that he's got that girthy midsection and that little tiny baby head.
Their tails are also attributed to being very small, very slender, and very pointy.
Another aspect of the Tsuchinoko lore is that because it was so hard for him to move because he was so chunky, he would actually sometimes ingest the slender and small part of his tail to form an Ouroboros, which, if you're familiar with your Greek roots and stuff, is the snake eating its tail in the circle, the symbol, all that jazz. And he would actually roll around in order to travel, which is also, again, mortifying to think about, this big chunky snake just rolling around. And I also think that's really cool and kind of plays into the discard effect of his card, which is when he is discarded or whether he's summoned, which is when he's discarded, he actually special summons himself anyway, which is kind of like the rolling aspect of the Ouroboros or the circle, where it is the same no matter what. It is a cycle, it is a circle, kind of like a boomerang kind of thing. I could totally be wrong, but that's what I got from it. Also, fun fact, Tsuchinoko actually gained a lot of hype in the early 2000s when allegedly a skeleton of a Tsuchinoko was found in Japan, but the actual popular reputation for Tsuchinoko actually became really popular a few years ago in 2000 when an alleged skeleton of Tsuchinoko was found in Yoshi in the Okayama prefecture, and there was a $205,000 reward to anyone who could hunt down a Tsuchinoko and actually bring one to light. Did it happen? I definitely don't think so, but I think that's really hilarious that they set out an actual search reward and a warrant just to find a Tsuchinoko. Tsuchinoko itself is also a little mischievous boy. They're known to hiss, they're known to spit, they're also known to be able to mimic voices, much like some of the other cryptids, like the jackalope. And Tsuchinoko is also known to have a very strong affinity for booze, so hold on to your sake or else he's gonna slither on up and take a sip. Not only that, but Tsuchinokos are actually very venomous. They're often compared to vipers because they have 2 fangs and can cause extremely dangerous bites, so don't get too close. But yeah, Tsuchinoko's just the resident chubby snake, just having a good time, having a drink, mimicking people from the darkness, and rolling on around. He's not really trying to kill people, but he's also not trying to have his day ruined. Kind of like me most days. But thanks so much, Pips, for all your hard work and for researching our sweet special boy Tsuchinoko, or Bachihebi.
I still like that name better. Can you imagine? Reveal Bachihebi?
Bachihebi, more like Bachi Heavy. Because he's chubby. I'm sorry. I love you, Tsuchinoko. You're perfect. All right. Thank you so much, Pips. Thank you for taking this trip to Japan with us. I hope you enjoyed the sakura blossoms. And let's take a nice journey back to the United States, where we'll wrap things up. So now that we've just explored all of the dangers, it almost seems like we barely touched the surface. Obviously, there are cryptids for every culture, and the 9 that we talked about today are not the only 9 that exist. There are tons of cryptids for every culture around the world, and we really hope you guys put in the comments some cryptids that we didn't talk about that aren't on danger cards that you would maybe like to see Konami make one day.
And I know we didn't really touch on the danger spell and traps, but if you look at some of the artwork for them, it's kind of cool because, as we did say throughout all of the actual cryptid descriptions, there are many hunts that were established to try to find these. There were many teams that were sent out to try to capture some of these, and I think some of the art really depicts that. And then in some of the other spell and trap cards, there's just like islands or like deserted lands or different places in which these cryptids could live or are known for living. So I really think it's cool that Konami even chose to incorporate the spells and traps with the lore as well.
Yeah, I find it almost inspiring that Konami made an entire archetype about cryptids, because it kind of really drives into that belief of, well, belief. Do you believe in the cryptids? What merit is there to them? And what evidence do we really have? And it just kind of gets you thinking about these things.
And I think for some final thoughts too, I really appreciate the effort that they put into the cards and the card effects, because cryptids are always some of those things where it's open to interpretation. Some people believe them, some people choose not to believe in them, and your personal belief and your cultural belief kind of has an impact on that society or on the way that you go about living life, which I think is really interesting when it comes to the actual danger card effects, because they have 2 actual effects. The first of which is summoning, and then the second of which is their actual resolution effect. The way that I kind of break this down is that every danger, if you believe in it, obviously it comes true, as in it summons itself, and then because you have the belief in that cryptid, it actually rewards you and allows you to draw a card and see something else. So I think that's really, really cool. And then the other one is, even if you don't believe in it, or like if it gets hit off of the actual activation and gets sent to the graveyard, whether you believe or you don't believe, it has an impact on the state of things regardless.
I also think it's cool about the drawing aspect when they're summoned is that, like, when you find one and you get to draw a card after summoning it, you get the opportunity to find potentially another danger or another cryptid, which is why they all play into each other. So I just think that's cool that it allows you to further hunt for cryptids and find more. So while we can't confirm or deny the existence of these creatures, it's really cool that cultures and communities around the world can have a mutual understanding that these things may or may not exist, and that we all have very similar stories about very similar creatures. And it's that sort of fantastical hype among all of us that brings it together in a really interesting way, that like, hey, what if these do exist? We've been talking about them for so long, but also why have we all been talking about them so long? There's got to be something to it. Is it necessarily that they're real creatures? Probably not. But there's some sort of mutual belief among people that I think is really exciting and elusive and worth mentioning. And I think overall it comes down to the whole conversation that, like, do we necessarily always have to know the truth? Is the truth something that we as humans have to find out? Maybe we're just not supposed to know these parts of nature. I don't know. We're just two people with a bunch of stuffed animals and Google. And at the end of the day, we want this to be something you all can think about. We want you to share your cryptid stories with us. Have you ever had a wild cryptid interaction that we should probably know about? Did the Loch Ness Monster eat your family? I don't know. But even though this wasn't your typical lore story where it's a flowing storyline, we wanted this to just be kind of like a fun little sit down where we go through different areas of the world and see how all these different cultures can come up with similar things that both frighten and excite society in different ways. We all have to get our imaginations jumping somehow, so what better way than to come up with creepy creatures that are eating ankles and shooting lightning bolts out of their eyes. I'd also just like to thank everyone in the Discord, specifically Greg, for helping me with the lore, for coming up with the alpaca pictures on the maps. You guys are the best for doing that as soon as I asked for it, literally last night. I could not have done any of this lore without you, and thank you to Ronan and several others of you in the Discord who helped me brainstorm. I'm really happy with the way that we did this, and I hope you all enjoyed it. Please let me know if you'd like us to do other archetypes or other lores. Drop it in the comments. Just drop it all in the comments. I want to hear your stories. We comment back on everything. If you're new to the channel, I hope you enjoyed and I hope you stick around, because this is one of my favorite series to do, even though it takes me forever to get them done. And if there's any info that you know about the cryptids that we didn't get to mention, feel free to let us know. Obviously, we can only share so much information, and it feels like we've never covered enough, but I hope this was at least enough to spark your imagination and your interest in the mysterious cryptids. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure you subscribe, like the video, check out all the links in the description, and have a magical Monday. We love you, you matter, and the alpacas are still on their way back, so I don't know if they're gonna be here for the outro, but we can still jam out together. And make sure you never stop exploring, because remember, the truth is out there.